So the app is actually called YourDNA.family. For those of you who want to look it up later on, it is actually been spelled Your DNA in one word and then .family. The reason is when I started the journey into genetic genealogy some 10 years ago, I started probably like everybody else with Excel spreadsheet, quickly uploaded my DNA and that of my mom and some other relatives to GetMatch, used the one-to-one and one-to-many tool there, did the triangulation and just copied the results over into that Excel sheet, which very, very quickly grew and was becoming very complicated. And then I said like, well, I studied computer science way back, even though then I never really worked in that area, worked mostly in business. And I thought, why not write an app actually that has the features that I want to have? And this is how the whole thing just started, right? The topic that I want to talk about today, and sorry for not having a video, I'm on a Mac Mini and they don't come with any cameras, is the more the merrier, and especially in dealing with large numbers of DNA matches, right? Which is something that a lot of people have a certain kind of negative view about, and we will go into detail why that is for large number of DNA matches. Okay, I hope everything works out technically. We will switch back and forth between the presentation and then also I'll do some live showing in the app. And I have some screenshots that I took on some family trees. So all that we present over here is some real life data, is matches of mine and a specific large triangulated group. So for the agenda, first of all, we're going to discuss or very, very quickly go over how large is really large. What do I mean by large in that sense? And the second point is, should we work at all on regions or loci that have a very large number of DNA matches? That is a question that a lot of people say like, well, I don't want to waste my time on that. There are, for the regions where we have a large number of DNA matches, and I will go over them, which in my opinion is hopefully the three major ones. Maybe there's more reasons for that, but I see three of them. And then we talk about three different dilemmas that the genetic genealogist is actually facing. One is so many DNA matches, so little time, which I think everybody can remember that is probably something that is haunting us the most, right, in our hobby. And then we talk about the solution for it. The second one is that we have so many matches, but almost no one actually replies when we send out any messages to them, or even if they reply, then they just say like, well, I have no information at all, right? Which is not very helpful. No family tree, nothing. And the third one is then that at least for non-Americans, Canadians, people especially in Europe, so in Asia, for example, like my wife, we have rather distant and small matches and also not such a large number of matches because the common ancestors are usually very, very far back, right? So that is a very specific problem that you might not be facing. So let's start with the first point. So how large is large? And I thought about it. To me, a large triangulated group is probably at the number of 30 DNA cousins. So terminology wise, DNA cousin for me is a DNA match that is triangulating. So there's a DNA triangulation with that DNA match and also with obviously a third or even more independent other matches. So 30 is really where probably the breaking point starts. Maybe some say 25. Definitely if we go into larger numbers, people are saying that's way too large of a triangulated group. Is just a waste of time. I don't want to work on it. And if we're going to look at the number of comparisons that are being necessary, so for example, with 10 DNA matches in a triangulated group, we have to do 45 comparisons between all of them. So if we want to do the whole work and make sure that each and every one is matching at the locus that we have identified, right, then it's 45 comparisons. So if you think about it, if we have 3 DNA cousins, then it's just 3, with 4 is already 6, right? So it goes up exponentially very quickly. And if we look into it just with 20, the number of DNA matches has been doubled. We already, instead of just going from 45 maybe to 90 comparisons, we end up at 190 comparisons, right? So 190 is probably something where you say, okay, I'm not going to do all of them in one time. So over time, it's not actually a big deal. Then we go at what I said earlier on, where I think, in my opinion, large number of triangulated cousins in triangulated group starts. 30 DNA matches would be 435 comparisons. With 50, we're already over 1,000 comparisons, 1,225. 100 is 4,950. The triangulated group that we're looking at in a short bit actually has over 110 DNA matches right now. And this is just from 23andMe. If obviously I would include matches from MyHeritage and Ancestry, and maybe even living DNA, the number obviously would go even further up. So you can imagine how quickly that number is going to explode. Then probably the topic that is controversial, right? So should we work on all regions of the chromosome of our human genome where we have a large number of DNA matches? And probably a lot of you have seen the analysis that a couple of very well-known genetic genealogists have run. I personally remember Debbie Kennett. I think she gave at the last conference in Salt Lake City. She gave a presentation about pile-up regions there. There's a video, at least, that is available on this topic. Like I said early on, in my opinion, there are actually 3 different reasons for a large number of DNA matches. The first one is, and these are IBD matches, right? So they triangulate, but due to some favorable mutations that have developed over time through natural selection, matches are very, very similar over a specific kind of loci that we have. And there was a study, I think more than 10 to 15 years ago from Lee and some other scientists that has identified that list. I am relatively sure it is also, if I remember correctly, there's a table on the ISOC website under access IBD regions. So this is probably 7 or 8 kind of regions that have been identified there that are basically the worst. The reason, for example, on the chromosome 6, 29 to 33 million base pairs is that there is the human leukocyte antigen on it that has caused this kind of large number of matches on this area, right? But nevertheless, they triangulate, right? But the question is really, should we work on it or should we not? And then the second area, and this is where I had some discussions with Debbie about it, because in my opinion, there must be also kind of natural large number of DNA descendants that were all coming from a common ancestor who had a lot of descendants who themselves actually survived long enough so that they have a large number of descendants, right? So when we go back, and maybe even through more than one wife, these people had 10, 12 children, and most of them survived and had children themselves. So if that happens, then obviously there is a larger number of descendants that these people have. Thus, they are being reflected in the DNA test as well, right? Because the DNA test, they're certainly been skewed to Western European Americans predominantly, but it obviously happens in all kind of ethnicities, right? So this is, to me, actually the reason of excessive IBD matches that makes absolutely sense to look into, right? And we will focus on such a group today. And then the third group, and the biggest difference to the first 2 is that they don't triangulate at all. And one specific area is actually just at the chromosome 9 centromere. If you have a match that is just within the area of the centromere, then you will see that there is lots of matches, but nobody matches anyone. But if you have a match that is starting before the centromere and actually ends after the centromere, the chances are very, very good that they are actually being triangulating there as well, right? So it all depends on the start and end position there. But nevertheless, you have to keep in mind that there are specific kind of areas, like in this example, where there is no DNA triangulation at all, and thus there is no reason to, if you know this area, to really dive into it if the match has been too small and exactly in that centromere area. Now, with this being out of the way, I wanted to just focus on the first dilemma that we're all facing, and which is actually, it was the main reason why I started to develop the app. Because I thought, like, if I continue to do all this in a spreadsheet, is with my limited amount of time that I had back then when I was still working, it's impossible to just add all these data, and the spreadsheet is just going to become a monster spreadsheet eventually, right? And again, we have, as a reminder, the number of comparisons that we have, right? So, I mean, most of us probably have used GetMatch and have used the one-to-many and then also the one-to-one there. So if you would go in, let's say, for 50 DNA matches, right, and you have to do 1,225 combinations of those people in the one-to-one function of GetMatch, and then just copy all the data, the various kind of segments that they maybe have, because they maybe have more than one matching segment. above your threshold, and then copy it into a spreadsheet and see if they're not only matching one locus, but they maybe matches another locus on a different kind of chromosome as well, which will happen for sure. That's a lot of work, right? It's pure overkill. I know that some people are still doing it. I think Jim Bartlett is one of the best examples. I mean, his master spreadsheet must be gigantic, and he has lots of information already in his head, so he knows all the ancestors for all these people. The solution to that is relatively simple. In my opinion, us humans are very, very good at tasks that require analysis, that require to just question data, to try to find out if you can find, for example, the most recent common ancestor between matches or yourself, develop family trees for ourselves as well as for our DNA cousins. These are all kind of things that are very, very hard to automate, even though Ancestry and MyHeritage, for example, have some excellent tools in there that are giving some good hints as to how possibly people could match on certain kind of surnames, for example, or within communities and locations, right? Automation is the key for that, especially when we work with large number of matches. So now I just want to quickly stop the sharing and switch to the app itself. Okay, so the app that you see now is actually the production app itself. So we're going to look at live data. For those of you that just want to spam me with certain kind of offers, just take a screenshot. That's my private email. When the app is starting, as you can see, it directly logs into 23andMe. And the reason is I started working on 23andMe because they actually have a quite good API, a programmable interface back then. Now things have changed actually a bit. They're no longer that kind of friendly to third-party developers, for example, Ancestry and Family Tree DNA as well. I think MyHeritage is probably the company that's the most positive towards third-party developers, right? So what can you see over here? So this is my data. This is actually my mom's DNA test, right? So there's also my DNA test here. And what the app has already been done, and let me just clear this a bit up. It has run through my matches and it has created these kind of cards, because I think cards is a very, very nice way to organize data. So you see, for example, a step here as a first step, you just import a getcom or an Ahnentafel. You also import the ancestry composition file from 23andMe. So that is their ethnicity prediction. We will see in a short while why that is so important. And then you can also import your DNA data there. And then the card is looking at all the matches, and I have over 3,000 matches for both my mom as well as myself, and puts the matches on the right loci and puts them together. So in this case here, for example, this is a match for my mom and certain other people, and they all match on the chromosome X, as you can see, from 106 to 111. And this is a possible triangulation card. So what that actually means is that right now at this locus, I don't have a triangulated group for my mom. Here over the right side, or even also here, we see there is a confirmed cousin card. So a confirmed cousin card means that I already have a DNA triangulated group here. In this case, chromosome 6 from 73 to 100, which is exactly actually the group that we're going to look up in a short while. And the number up here is the number of outstanding comparisons we still have to do. So here you can already see I have almost 300 comparison outstanding, but I did already several thousand comparisons with this group. But let's take, for example, the group, they are both on X. This is all X, almost on 6, and it's a bit further out. Let's try this one. Okay, the confirmed cousin. And what the app is now doing is that automatically it corresponds with 23andMe, and it's just going to check on these people. And you can see the comparison going on there. That all goes automatically. And it quickly tells actually if they are matching or not matching. And if, for example, one of them matches, it also identifies where they match, because it can be, I think we're looking at chromosome 2 for this card, but it can be that actually they have been matching at any other locus. So now we already have confirmed cousin card for a triangulated group. So this is exactly what I meant before. So two people are probably matching at a location that is not the specific one on chromosome 2, but on a different chromosome. And it has found that there is at least a third kind of independent cousin there. And it has created another card automatically. So these cards that you see here, they are not being done by us. We don't need to do anything, right? The only thing that we need to do here is just click the card once. And as you can see, it now goes through the comparison, and it has already managed to do over 11 comparisons. The big problem of, as I said before, and I use GetMatch as an example, right? So obviously the main tool that people have been using there. You go in there and you see how quickly a comparison has been done here, right? So that is 3 to 4 seconds usually. And the main reason is we can actually do it much faster than that, but in order not to violate free&me's user agreement, we have to just go very, very slow with them, right? And if you compare that, how long it's going to take to go to GetMatch and just look up the GetMatch numbers, type them both in and click on one-to-one comparison, and then just copy the data over into your spreadsheet, find out, oh, there is an additional match, for example, on chromosome 17. You just have to copy it into a different folder, or however way you're actually going to organize that. That is a lot of tedious work that you have to do. Very, very time consuming. We have a couple of users, for example, that just do this whilst they've been studying. So we have students, they just have the computer open in the background. We have some other users that have just told me they're actually using the app at work. So they have it running in the background, and from time to time, they just switch over and see if the card has been done, and then they just click the next card, right, and continue their work. Okay, so we wait for the logging to be done, and we were just talking about the TG on chromosome 6. So as you can see over here, I actually have 212 triangulated groups. There is also a discussion about how many triangulated groups a person actually has. Yeah, that is obviously been largely dependent on what kind of threshold, minimum threshold you use for the centimorgans, right? The further obviously you go down, the more your triangulated groups are going to be split up, because they're then representing ancestors, common ancestors further back in time. Yeah, the magic number is around 250, I think, even though if I recall correctly, Jim Bartlett has something like 400 or 350 to 400 triangulated groups. Right, so he's probably using 7 centimorgans as a minimum criteria. I use 8 centimorgans here, but most of the matches are actually a bit larger. So when we go to chromosome 6, so I just selected it here, maybe a bit too fast. Here you can see all the different chromosomes, and the number that is behind is actually telling how many triangulated groups I have in there. I selected chromosome 6, and you can see the matches here with the corresponding names. For example, that one is a very, very large one, as you can see here, this one, right? Which is exactly the triangulated group that we're going to look at right now. As I said before, these are people that are matching, and we have, I think in here, over 5,000 matches between those people. And they're being ordered by the length of the match. So if you can see here on the chromosome 6, a lot of the people start very early on at 32 centimorgan, and they go beyond, just slightly beyond 100 and 107 over here. So the matching segment, the green one, is basically green and orange together. Or in this case, you can actually even see there orange is in between. Now, orange is the area that everyone in the triangulated group shares. This is the DNA that with all of us has actually been inherited, right? You can see that, for example, these people over here, right? Let's say Christine and Dustin. Let me see if I can mark them. Yes, they have a slightly smaller kind of match at the end. So that means, like, through the recombination events, which are happening randomly, as you know, they lost this part of the ancestral DNA that is coming further up here, completely lost. Now, on the other hand, if we look at Leonard and Karen, just as I see the name now, Karen is actually a match of mine at MyHeritage as well, because I just saw her name there. So it's pretty good to follow up with her. You can see that she is sharing actually a very, very large part that goes further out, or we actually have a couple people down here. Now, if you look at them, and they start at chromosome 1 and they go to 170, you actually know that they're in a parent-child relationship, right? This is the whole length of the chromosome 6 that they share. So we have a lot of them, and as you can see, it further loads. It takes a moment, it further loads, and like I said, there is thousands and thousands and thousands of matches. So imagine you would just do that all by hand. Obviously, there's also no visualization if you do this by hand. I will go back to the presentation. So that was the solution 1 that we have. Now, the second one is that we actually have quite a large number of genealogists that we can contact through whichever messaging system there is. I mean, each and every direct-to-consumer company that we test with has a messaging system. Some are better, some are worse. But the thing is that most of the time, actually, nobody answers. And I don't know how it is with you, but my experience is that those people that answer usually have no information somehow, or actually are not triangulating in the end, right? So they're very, very interested to find out the common ancestors. But at least for me, it might be that the ancestor is too far out, more than 500 years ago, and I can't really do something about it. Comments that I've heard over time, over the last couple of years on this is like, who are these DNA matches and how are we related, right? Or they say like, I don't recognize your name. I have no idea how we're related. So, or locations as well, right? They maybe say, oh, I didn't even know I have some German ancestors, because mostly if over 80% of my ancestors are from Germany. So it's very easy to say that the likelihood is very, very high that our common ancestor is German. And then the other problem is the closest DNA match that I have is very, very distant, meaning probably a fourth cousin or fifth cousin, or even what's sometimes being called as a distant cousin. And nobody has been responding to my messages or knows nothing about his family. For example, people that have been adopted, obviously, it's not out of no interest, but they just don't have any kind of information. And I'm happy to help them and have successfully helped a couple in the past to find their birth parents. And the last point, we had that before, I only have limited time for genealogy, right? Which is I think something that everyone has. The solution to all of this, in my opinion, is focus on surnames, on locations, and some other Goldilocks that is there. So there is a treasure trove of information, even in databases like, for example, 23andMe, which the main part of their customer do the DNA test because of their health offerings that they have. I would say probably 70 to 80% of the people do that. So it's kind of natural that they don't have any kind of interest in genealogy, right? And hence I'm not replying. But there are some people that are replying and give some information about surnames and location. With that, I'm gonna quickly stop and share the app again. So this is, if you remember, the triangulated group on chromosome 6, 73 to 100 base pairs. Now we want to look at, like I said, we want to look into surnames first of all. And if I click on surnames, the app is just doing this wonderful kind of thing. And now you can actually see, luckily I have a very, very large monitor, and it might be actually too small for you to see on your screen. So what the app has done, it has looked at all the surnames that these 110 plus DNA cousins in the triangulated group have posted on 23andMe. They have a specific field for there where they can say, okay, these are my surnames that I'm looking for, right? And this is all interactive here, right? So we can just move things around and they will move. But obviously this is a big mess, right? Nobody can see anything. So what we can do is we can click this filter button up here. And what the app is now doing, it actually has put these together and only identified people that have a common name. So for example, this Carla Combs, right? If I move her a bit out, she has the Adams surname together with, let me just pull her over, with Larry Frazier. And Larry Frazier actually has the Frazier name with Dwayne Powell. And then it goes on, he actually has the Moore name with Miranda Brown, Stephen Thompson, and there we go, Karen Gillespie, which is the one that is my match on MyHeritage, which I should remember, and I will reach out to her tomorrow in order to find out. But highly likely, actually, because all these people, 1, 2, 3, 4 people share the Moore name. So even though Moore has been quite popular, but it makes a lot of sense that Moore is probably the name that connects them to this triangulated group. So what we can look at here is, for example, there's my mom here. That's kind of interesting. She shares with this Diane Goodman a surname that is kind of unique. It is a big mystery to mine. So I'm down to 1810 when this guy has come to the location where actually my grandfather was born. The only information that I have is that he's from Bohemia. Other than that, I have no information about it. And I couldn't find the village so far that was being named. And we will come back to this Diane Goodman later on, because I just found out today that she is key to identifying who the common ancestor is, and even further back. other people that we have. Oh yeah, we have, for example, this lady over here, Charlene Skaminach. She is actually a wonderful lady that has reached out to me via email. And this is how my whole interest in this triangulated group started. So she replied to the email that I sent out as a standard. I contact every single DNA match on 23andMe with some information about my family tree, either on my father's or my mother's side, depending on where I am. And she has replied to me, and she actually said, okay, yeah, she has the Bentley name, and she's actually a Bentley by birth, so that's her married name, and also Lunsford. And as we can see, there is a connection to a David Lunsford here, right? That we can see here. They share, and a Colette Robertson also has the same name, but also is on the Bentley line. That's where Colette has been related to her. And then we have another person down here, which is Vicky Burkett. Again, someone that has been very crucial for my research, and she is on my heritage as well. And as you can see, she has matches with this Brenda Bergheiser on the names Hartman, Agee, Lumpkin, Stark, right? And then with Michelle Campbell on Burkett. So you probably get the picture. So this graph, like I said, is done automatically. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to write down any kind of name. You don't have to remember any kind of name. It just does it automatically for any triangulated group that you have. Just to show you again, I'm not making this up. I'm just picking this group. I go into surnames and boom, here's the surname group for this, right? And unfortunately, there is not a match over here in this one, right? So if I do this, then, oh, there's two people that match on the surname Harms. So I go back to chromosome 6. So that was number 1, which is surnames. Number 2 is locations. So as you can see, we also have the point map here. And once again, so it's actually asking me to identify locations without a latitude and longitude. I have only very, very few left, and I'm not so sure about where the exact locations is. So what it does, once again, it is going into the data that the DNA matches have entered at 23andMe. So they have a surname field, and they have information about where your 4 grandparents are from. So you can enter that data, and you can also enter locations that you've been interested in, right? All that data is being used by our app. So it takes a little bit of moment because, like I said, we have 110 people here. So the database, and by the way, the servers are in US. I'm going from Singapore to the US, draw the data here, and then just show it. So what you see over here, obviously 527 people with location information. This is my data, right? It concentrates into Germany very, very clearly. We have one match over here, which is Karen. So she entered the information about Sweden, right? That's why the match is here. We have 11 people in the UK, which is kind of interesting. So for example, Scott has entered Wales, and I think he has also entered, oh no, there's another person in Ireland. I think he has entered Edinburgh as well. Oh, there's 2 people in Edinburgh. No, the same person, okay. And Scott has entered Scotland. I think actually that this is not the location that is key. So we should rather look into the US. And the number 42 here, this is actually the geographical center point of the US. So this is United States, right? So we ignore this. But if we look into the matches, apart from a couple of matches that we have on the West Coast, even here in Ontario, in Quebec, we have matches. In this area here, we have a bit of a concentration of matches, especially here in the 18th. So if we click on it, we just zoom down automatically one level, right? And again, everything happens automatically. Just imagine you're looking at matches and you are not familiar where, for example, counties are. And you're not familiar that counties share a border unless you maybe are very, very good in geography or you have been to the place. But it doesn't really matter because the app here is just putting everything together, right? So we have 3 matches over here. Whitley County, Corbin, which is in Whitley County. Okay, so never been there. Sorry for that. And then we have a bit larger number over here, 7, which is in Kentucky. So we have several people: Stephen Thompson, Larry Frazier, Stephen again, Holly Hopkins, Denise Waltz, Rosalind Cole. So they all say Kentucky. So once again, this is probably something that we should keep in mind, that Kentucky is a location where certainly most likely our ancestors or the ancestors of these people have been living in the past. Now, the third thing that I want to show, which is under that Goldilocks category, is when we go over the to-do that we have over here. So again, what the app has been told you is there is a number of to-do tasks, actually 102, and bear with me because once again, the loading takes some time. So what has the app done here? The app is looking at several kind of categories. The app is looking at people that are being closely matching. So for example, brother and sisters, parent-child, aunts and uncles, first cousins, second cousins. First cousin once removed, half sister, half siblings, whatever kind of thing. Identifies them and says like, these are Goldilocks that you should go after. It also tells you if someone has put up a URL, a link to a family tree, because that's possible at 23andMe. I mean, they have their own family tree right now, but people put links up to MyHeritage and other places. Okay, then we have another category. For example, here, this Ryan Henwood, she has posted 4 or more surnames, right? And it gives the recommendation to ask that person for a GetCom file or research for marriage records with these names. And then the next one is Stephen, Franz, and Amber. Franz, Rago are parent and child. So however, the app cannot figure out automatically who's the parent, who's the child. Here we have the example that we had earlier on. Tara and Walter are actually closely related, and we see they are 586 centimorgan. Here, Tara and Kitty, 1,109. So if you then go and look it up on shared DNA, you know the most likely relationship, right? So in the future, I plan actually to come up with some kind of help here that is going to tell you if you don't have the numbers in your head automatically. It goes down here to, this again is Karen that I want to look up, and Miranda Brown. And I know already if I see the Brown name, I'm smiling. I know how they are related. It goes a couple generations back. The same here, Stephen Thompson. So you see the list is very, very long, right? And this is actually kind of clickable. So let me see Brenda Bergheiser, right? So if you go to Brenda, so we click on it and it shows us all the information. If you remember, Brenda was being shown earlier on, and she has this rare surname, Agi Bergheiser, or Bergheiser is definitely German origin, in my opinion. Hartmann, even though it's written in German with a second N, it's German. Stark and Lumpkin, I have no idea where that name is from. You see that I added some additional information here. So this is in the comments section of 23andMe, and once again, it's automatically being taken over, right? The app is just taking all that data. So here is the locations that Brenda has been looking into: United States, Washington, Spokane, and Spokane County, right? And then you can add a private note that only you can see. And the maternal hub group is here as well. And likewise for male, also the paternal haplogroup. So that will be helpful if, for example, you want to just identify matches that are on your all male or all female line. The solution to number 2 is, so like I said, solution number 1 is automation, which you see at work here again, right? Like I said, all this information that you saw here, the map, the surnames, as well as the to-do list, is automatically generated by the app, right? It loads the data when you upload your relatives file from 23andMe, and it just looks for matches automatically between surnames, and well, you just have to look at the results and come to certain kind of conclusions yourself. Now we cross back to the app. The third one is, like I said earlier on, is a bit of a specific problem for people that were born in Europe, right? Or in Africa, Asia, obviously likewise. So let's say anyone outside of North America, I would say even South America, because we're underrepresented in the DNA tests, right? Most of the 40 million people or something like, or 35 to 40 million people that have done DNA tests, autosomal DNA tests, are probably from North America, right? So as you can see over here, my problem is, so this is my column, right? Relatives in common. And you see the yes represents these people are all triangulating. So for example, all these people are triangulating, but you can see David is a 4th cousin, Colette, 4th cousin, they're all 4th cousin, right? 0.23 is actually the percentage, is not in centimorgan, it's a percentage. And here as well. The only one who is a bit closer, which is a 3rd cousin once removed, and I know actually the common ancestor to her, she is not part of that triangulated group. This is like I said, my specific problem, but is probably been happening to some people as well. We if we have matches, actually, we have very, very small matches. Most people will just say, oh, I have so many matches with 25 centimorgan or more, 30 centimorgan, 40 centimorgan. I am so busy because, look, I'm using a spreadsheet. It takes a lot of time to go to get match, enter all that information in my spreadsheet. I have no time to look into these large triangulated groups where there is only very, very small matches. Sorry. They're really missing on a very, very easy, in this case, it probably took me, I think, 3 hours in total in just one afternoon to find a most common ancestor that is very, very far back. And they're all missing on it. The solution is relatively simple, and a lot of people are not doing that because I say they just focus on their own family tree, and they say like, well, if these people are so far back, there's no way I'm going to identify the most common ancestor or the common ancestor between me and all these people. What is very, very easy is to identify the most common ancestor between 2 of your DNA cousins, or 3 of them, or 4 of them, right? Which is what Jim, who should show up on the screen, Jim Bartlett, he coined the methodology of walk the ancestor back, right? Where you start, for example, with first cousins, right? Who have a grandparents, and then you just go from the grandparents further back, just one generation further back to integrate second cousins, right? And then you go one generation further back and you integrate third cousins, and then one generation further back, and you guessed it, you have the fourth cousins being in there, right? That's how you build it up. It's a relatively easy methodology once you have done it a couple of times, right? And it's part of everyone's tool set. So I want to show actually a couple of screenshots, most likely, how I did it with, in this case, with this lady reaching out to me. What she did is she sent to me and said, like, we are actually matching on my paternal side, on my father's side. Why is that? Because I have a cousin, David Lunsford. We must be somewhere between, the MRC couple that we immediately identified is George Warren Bentley and Arita Pearl Lunsford, which is grandparents. From this on, I went online and I relatively quickly found both people there. I had to do some data correction there, as we all know, to be a bit careful with the data that we find on the internet, but I could find it. And I built out 2 generations from her grandparents, from the MRCA couple out, right? So I actually build out more. You can see the errors are in here. I have a program which only runs, unfortunately, on Mac computers, which is called Family Tree or something like that. And it automatically downloads ancestors, for example, from Family Search, right? So you can download ancestors, descendants, thousands of them. It will just do it automatically. So when I said to her, well, this second cousin of yours, David, how can we go further on from there, right? Have you spoken to him? And so obviously she knows how she's been related with him, but she wasn't so sure about further on, right? So it can be on either side there. We are going to find out on the next slide. What I then built out is another relationship here, and this is the Lunsford tree that eventually her second cousin is going down. I identified that basically the connection is from here. So John Washington, Lunsford, and Pernia May Brown is the connection, the MRCA couple, right? And this, for example, is the Mac family software that I'm using here, and you can see all these are not yet downloaded from Family Search. So you just click on it and it downloads then the information, right? But it shows you, for example, how far the trees are going back. Is very, very helpful. So then I remembered, if you remember the chart that I showed earlier on the surnames, and then I showed Brenda Berkheiser and also Vicky Burkett. And Vicky had, because she's actually Brenda's mom, right? And Brenda's daughter is also DNA tested, right? So we have 3 generations there. And she had surnames mentioned. They were Agee, Stark, Lumpkin. Most likely these are grandparents, right? Like I said in the to-do tooltip that was been given there. I went to Family Search and I said, is there a marriage between a person with the last name Agee and a person with the last name Stark? And then I searched, and I also clicked on that is actually 100% going with the correct writing. And immediately it came up with Barbara Jane Agee, who was the spouse, on a marriage in Virginia, and she married to a Ira Bruce Stark. And then we have Robert Henry Agee and Lumpkins, which is the name that she mentioned. So immediately I knew that was the third name there, Lumpkins. That must be her family tree. So I didn't actually got any response until today from Vicky, right? I reached out to her with the information. She never replied, unfortunately. But even without her help, just by going through the information that she posted, I was able to identify the path that the DNA had been taken for her. What I did then, I went online. Remember, this is Ira and this is Barbara Jane that we have here. And I built out the next two generations, right? Which is relatively simple to do. I actually build out even a bit further, but I just show the relationship over here. And you can already see, so this is probably a bit giving a hint away when you look at this marker. This is actually the path that the DNA came down to her. For now, we're just looking at this information, and obviously it can be any of those 8 different great-grandparents that we have over here. Vicky is on MyHeritage as well. So I went to MyHeritage. This is my mom, right, Marita. This is Vicky, and there's a picture of her. And she's actually been identified as a third cousin to a distant cousin. And you can see this is already a pretty okay match, right? 0.3%, 17.5 centimorgan. So this is what us Europeans have to deal with, right? Not most of you probably, like I said, wouldn't even look at it because it's less than 20 cm or even less than 25. And this is the names that she's been listing. And as I looked into the shared matches, so this is the sister of my mom, there is a guy that shows up next that is her first cousin twice removed, up to fourth cousin. So MyHeritage is a bit unclear as to what the exact relationship is, but it's 86 centimorgan by the name of Christopher Hartmann. Oh, Hartmann, if you remember earlier on, I said Hartmann is of German origin, right? Is actually a title of a person that, as far as I know, was managing farms. So I said, like, well, that's not a too common name probably in the US, right? If that Christopher Hartmann is related to her, let's look at it. And you know that MyHeritage has this where you can click on and you can see actually if they triangulate, and they triangulate perfectly. And there's other people like the Karen Gillespie that I talked about earlier on. So she's just the next match below this. So I knew I was onto something. So I found out the common ancestor between Christopher and Vicky. And as you can see, again, Christopher, I reached out to him. He never replied. So I don't know what the name of his father is, right? It's not even important, right? He's probably living anyway. And this is his grandfather. This is his great-grandfather. And this is his great-great-grandfather, right? And as you can see here, Vicky and Christopher are third cousins. And if you remember earlier on, the prediction that they say is first cousin twice removed to fourth cousin. Turns out to be, in reality, there are third cousins. Once you're in this kind of centimorgan range, it's very, very difficult to identify. This is showing you how this walk the ancestor back is going to work, right? We just basically identify the first kind of levels, build out the family trees of our DNA cousins. We already did ours. So I don't even worry about that. Can I find a match right now between these people and myself? I just go the easy way and identify simple third cousin matches, or in the case of Charlene before, a very easy second cousin match. And remember, the to-do list in the app gives you automatically these kind of matches. So you don't have to go through large number of comparisons, like I said, get match 1-to-1, and then note down and say, oh, these two people actually are probably in the range of second cousin once removed. So I should look at them, right? The app is doing all this work for you. Like I showed under solution 1, you just click and then you do something else. You watch a Netflix movie, you work, you study. I mean, you can just walk away and you just walk the dog and you come back and the app has done hundreds, if not thousands of comparisons. Very, very simple. So now we're down to 1855. Both of them were being born. So that's already quite good, I think, but we're not going to stop there. So the next thing is that I said, okay, we had the Hartmann surname, right? So can I connect Christopher Hartmann with Charlene's Hartman ancestor, which is Mary Hartman, right up here. And guess what? Mary Hartman leads us to Abraham Hartman. Sorry if it's probably difficult to see. And Susanna Long. So this is the MRC couple that I talked about earlier on, which has been born in, I think Abraham has been born in 1790 and Susanna has been born in 1791, and they married in 1810. And this is showing you the relationship between Charlene and Christopher. I think they're a fifth cousin once removed, right? Because there is a generation missing over here. We're getting into the range where probably Ancestry is going to tell you we have enough matches. We're not going to show you that match, right? It's a distant cousin, two distant cousins. But here, 23andMe luckily isn't so restricted. They show all matches down to 7 centimorgans, and in some cases they show additional matches down to 5 centimorgans, right? We could identify here the path that those two went along. Some famous bloggers are in there. They say like, well, how do you know that actually the DNA went through this precise kind of line? I mean, given with pedigree collapse, it could be that they're actually been related in another path, right? So the DNA actually went somewhere else. The simple way is that what you want to do, you want to get as many kind of most common recent ancestors that you can do between people. And in this case, we have 3 people identified. We have Charlene here and we have Christopher. So we also want to take a look at Charlene and Vicky, right? And again, you can see that Charlene and Vicky go back to the same couple of Abraham Hartman and Susanna Long, which is exactly what we want to do. We want to find more and more people that have been descendants, DNA descendants of this couple over here, which by the way is quite interesting. Susanna was being buried in a Mennonite church, and I think her father fought in the Revolutionary War, if I remember that correctly. But I haven't been able to really confirm further back up, unfortunately. Before we go into Q&A, there is one more hint I want to show in the app itself. So you should be able to see this. And so here on the left side, as you can see, you see all the DNA cousins that I have, right? It's a long list. And there was one lady that I was particularly interested in, Diane Goodman. There she is. So now if we look into her, she has the name Kroll. And my surname that I'm looking for is actually Kröll. It has 2 dots above the O, which is a specific additional alphabet that we have in German. Right, so which is most likely his original name. So I think this person, like I said, only know that he's from Bohemia, from a very, very small village. I actually even drove nowadays into the Czech Republic a couple of years back and tried to find the village. And I found a village by the name, but it was the wrong one. She has one very, very interesting connection that she's been giving. And for that, we're going back into the map. I have to just give some additional information here. In my heritage, I was able to identify, again, through a DNA cousin, that is a DNA cousin on 23andMe and my heritage, right? So he has tested at both companies. He goes by the rather unusual name of Altergott, which is also of German origin. And what I found out is that the story goes back. I was able to identify that the common ancestor is coming from the Palatine region in Germany. And these people then went on, because there was a lot of war and famine going on. So, and they had a lot of children surviving, but they couldn't divide up the farm anymore. So they went on with a couple of people from the village and first went into the northern part of Germany and worked there as settlers. So they got some land there that they could work on. But that wasn't really working out because, the area was not really very, very good to do any kind of farming on. So they felt betrayed. And at the same time, if you remember the Tsarina, they actually got the word out that they were very interested in German settlers come to Russia and start farming there. And it turns out to be that some of the families went then on to Russia, to an area directly next to the Dnieper River. And these people are commonly been known as Volga Germans. So if you can see over here, we have one dot here. This is Russia in the Russian spelling, so it's all the original spelling here, right? So if we look at this, there is this Rayanne Henwood. She has as a location Saratov, Gorod Saratov in Oblast, Russia, which is exactly the location where my Volga Germans are coming from. So I was able to identify them down to, I think, late 1600, but I haven't been able so far to really link them to my own family tree. But now with this link from Diane, looking at the Krull family, I think actually that is the key where I can just put those family back together. And like I said, it's probably relatively easy to look for more surname matches. So once again, if you go into the surname feature, click on the filter here, we could, for example, pick any kind of name like Brown. So we have Miranda, like I said it earlier on, and Heather Dawson. And if you remember correctly, we had Brown on one of the lines there. So I'm relatively sure that they are being related there, right? And we can also identify other kind of names that are being common. Here is somebody with the name Hart, Taylor, and so on. Adams, there's more people here that I connect probably to that Burkett line, which I have identified already here. So going from one most recent common ancestor that we have and just adding another DNA cousin, it's just going down, looking at all the DNA descendants, which is easy on Family Search or Ancestry or MyHeritage, right? And then eventually you will probably find that person. Maybe with female, not so easy because Campbell might not be her maiden name, right? But I think you get the picture of the method that we're going to use. And here's a big chunk of people. You see the lines here, how they're being connected to each other. The last part that I just want to say, just one other feature that I quickly want to touch on is this discussions here, right? So it's probably a bad example because there's no information in here, but what you have is the discussions area is a private forum where you can communicate, you can actually invite those DNA cousins that I showed there as guests over into the software. And only those people that have inherited the same piece of DNA like you and those other 110 people, they can see the information over here. And you can go in here and, for example, say, okay, this is the information that I know, right? So I know that Abraham Hartman and Susanna Long are the identified most recent common ancestors for the following DNA cousins. And you can just explain a bit about their history and so on, whatever you want to write down there. You can add the information about the Volga Germans, the story, the names, locations, birth dates, whatever kind of stuff. But obviously you can also add that into the smart family tree, right? Which is right now, I haven't filled anything up, so I cannot really show that over here. There is another feature. It also does a chromosome map automatically. And I will use that because I want to look up a recent common ancestor for my mom. Oh, by the way, the 45% over here that you see, that means 45% of my mom's genome is being covered by triangulated groups. So each of these blocks is a triangulated group. And you see the information, like in this case, it's on chromosome 4, it starts at 168 to 178. Remember the ancestry ethnicity prediction that 23andMe does, right? We download that data automatically as well, or you can import it. And it's predicting that this person is of French or German descent, or maybe Northwestern European, which is a much higher category. So here we have some people, if we go over it, it actually tells the MRCA couple, right? As we can see, is in several of them. Let's see, go to triangulated group 1, 34, change to here. See, we actually have 2 segments. You can see one is I think if I remember, it's the same common ancestor. Right, it starts over here and here as well. Let's see if I have a node in here. Not here. Sorry for that. I probably should have prepared that better because normally nope, it's also not filled out. This is not yet filled out. One other thing that I want to show you, we have the MRCA here. So this again has been done automatically, right? So this is where I imported the family tree. You can import the family tree for yourself, for any DNA cousin. You can import it for a descendant of yourself, any of your ancestors, right? And in this case, if I click on the MRCA, it gives us a wonderful overview, which might be a bit intimidating at first, but bear with me. So you see, here is one of them. This is Johann Peter Martin Stammen. who is actually from a very, very small village where my grandfather was from. His son immigrated to the US. And these are all here's the son, John Stammen. But there is also other ancestors that we have here. So for example, this person here, Mary Degree, you see the DNA symbol over here. She's part of this triangulated group on chromosome 1, 34 to 52. The golden path, it should be gold, maybe a bit less to see, and the blinking path is showing the path that the DNA from this common ancestor has gone down and gone down to her. And if we actually scroll up also to Rita over here, and then you see the line goes up here, right, and goes up and goes up and goes up, and you see I have a lot of descendants. For example, these are also Carl and his brother Raymond are also descendants, but not for this triangulated group. So what happened for this specific triangulated group, they didn't get the DNA. It probably was been deleted through a recombination event, but they're in another triangulated group. So, and then eventually we go up here to Anna-Katharina Stammen. And as you can see, this is here, this is my grandfather, this is my mom, and this is me. And then we also have, so this is a rather, it really helps if you have a large monitor. I hope you can see it all on your devices. So here is very, very easy. For example, if you want to fill out information about this person. So he's from Holzheim and Speck. Remember that we actually saw the name Speck as a surname. This is a place name here as well, right? So it's been very, very interesting to see. So you can just add information here. You can add another child if you want. These are the children. You can delete them. So all that. But usually you can actually import it. So if, for example, I want to say I want to import a family tree, I just go to here and I import a getcom or an Ahnentafel. For example, all the descendants of him. That's how this tree has been done, right? So I didn't enter them by hand. It was all the DNA import. And then we have another nice kind of feature, which is this button over here. So from this descendant onward, most recent common ancestor, it is building up a word map. So this is just the surnames of the ancestors of Johann Peter Martin Stammen. So you see the names here being printed up. And if you, for example, have a female name, that is because the surname of that person, Eva, here is being unknown. This once again helps you a lot because you could just share that with other people and say, do you have any of these names? Or you can just check it yourself. And thanks everyone for joining. I hope the presentation was helpful. And yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I think Tim has the details. I mean, you saw my private email address there. Yeah, happy to just answer questions also via email if you don't have the time to stick around for the Q&A.